in a coffee shop in a city, which is every coffee shop in every city on a day, which is every day. Hello, friends, and welcome to the 6th episode of Barista Unfiltered, a podcast dedicated to the life and times of baristas. They tell us what's brewing in work, flowing, an unfiltered podcast. I'm Jodie Lee.
And I'm Austin Miller.
We're your hosts. We are so grateful that you've joined us for another episode. That sweet voice in the background is Candace Patterson. She is a barista who lives in Charleston, South Carolina, and she's going to tell us about her life there. She's going to tell us about her work as a coffee shop manager and her adventures with Dos Bandidos, badass silkscreen artists. This is going to be a wild adventure, people, so get ready. At the end of the show, we're going to have our weekly update from Jake Shell, and it's a story you don't want to miss. Before we get started, I want to give a shout out to a listener, maybe one listener, maybe multiples. It's hard to tell with the kind of statistics we get. But we do know there's someone in Sao Paolo who's listening to us in Brazil. So Austin did a little bit of Wikipedia searching, and he figured out that Sao Paulo is a port city, and it is.
And it's actually Santos. Santos in the state, yeah. So it's Santos, and it's in the state of Sao Paulo. The city is not Santos.
Cool.
It's not probably. I don't know how you pronounce it properly. I guess Santos.
Santos.
Yeah.
It's a port city, and when I'm reading on Wikipedia, it's home to the Coffee Museum, and that is where world coffee prices were once negotiated. It's the biggest seaport in Latin America, and it exports 15% of their exports are coffee. So I'm wondering if that person might want to be interviewed on the podcast. So we're just saying, reach out to us and let us interview you if you are so bold, if you dare. Candace has dared. So I want to welcome her to the show and thank her for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Welcome,
It's
Candace.
So bright,
excited to talk to you today.
Okay, the first thing we got to know from you is what kind of coffee did you have this morning?
Okay, so I had 2 cortados. I had 2 doppio cortados at different times. I woke up and went to my exercise class like a badass at 6 a.m. and then had one and then had another one at 9 because it's 11 here or 11:30.
Yeah. So tell me, what does doppio mean?
It just means a double shot of espresso. So a double shot of espresso with even parts steamed milk with that perfect silky texture.
Yes.
So good. It's my favorite.
My understanding is that when you order a cortado, you are already saying you want 2 shots. Is that wrong?
It is. No, it's not wrong. But sometimes people say, may I have a single cortado? But you're right. Technically, it is 2 shots already. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So is it possible you could go order a cortado and get the doppio when you meant to get the single if you don't specify?
Oh, absolutely. If you don't specify, I just have gotten into the habit of saying it because so many people order it in the afternoon and they just want a single shot. So a lot of times they just order, especially in the afternoons, a single or a doppio cortado. And the mornings, it's usually, may I have a cortado? I just need one.
Just help me out.
Help me out, please.
How many ounces of beverage are you getting in a cortado?
4.
4 ounces. 2 ounces of it are the 2 shots.
Yep.
And the other 2 ounces of it are whole milk steamed.
Yeah. And I mean, you can get an almond milk, an oat milk. You can get any kind of milk. I just personally love cow's milk and I love whole milk. So, and I think it steams the best and is just pairs with the espresso.
Now, are you guys trying oat milk at all? I mean, that's all the rage right now.
It's all the rage. So Oatly is sometimes hard to order and it's a lot more expensive. So we're just doing almond, coconut, soy, and then cow's milk.
Okay. What about you, Austin?
We just got it. We started doing oat milk probably like a month ago because everybody was asking for it. And like you said, it's like all of a sudden the thing. And we actually get it from Pacific. They started making it.
Oh, did they start it? Okay.
Yeah.
I'll look into that.
So that's, I don't know if that's cheaper than Oatly. I've seen Oatly online. I've never actually seen it in person. But yeah, people like it. It's sweet. The oat milk we have is really sweet.
Yeah, I make my own actually at home sometimes. It's so easy.
So tell us about that process.
So you take oats, preferably organic, and you take filtered water and you soak them for, it could be, I don't know, 4 hours or overnight, whatever you feel like really. And then you take in the food processor a date, the oats and filtered water, a little bit of salt, you food process it, take a cheesecloth and then dump it out and squeeze it over a pitcher. And then you have oat milk, and it lasts for up to 5 days. So you can make enough for 5 days worth. So
that's really neat. And the date is what's providing the sweetness.
A little bit of sweetness. It's not, when you drink it, you don't even think it's sweet, but without it, it kind of fills out the flavor instead of adding sweetness. But yeah, that's a tiny bit. It's delicious.
I got to try this. Everyone's talking about it. I just haven't had it yet.
Yeah, because most of the oat milk, which might not be a block for some people, has some kind of weird preservative like calcium, laurate, whatever. I mean, I'm sure I'm pronouncing it incorrectly, but when you make it yourself, it doesn't have all that junk. So
That's really cool. Well, I'm gonna have to make my own. Austin,
it's
you might
really
need to do that too.
I know.
It's good in cereal if you eat cereal.
Yeah. And do you use the steel cut oats or the whole
The regular oats steel cut make it gummy. Does that make sense? Like kind of a weird texture and a weird flavor. You can do it, but nobody recommends it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, Austin, why
So,
don't you start us off?
So first of all, where do you work in Charleston? Tell me about the coffee shop that you're currently managing and where that is and what y'all are all about.
Yeah. So it's called City Lights Coffee. It's kind of a nod. It obviously has nothing to do with City Lights Bookstore in San Francisco, but it's kind of a nod to what the bookstore used to be, like cultivating an environment of people that could be weird and wacky and drink coffee. And it's also just really a rad space. It's on Market Street, so it's downtown Charleston. I ride my bike there every day. And we've been in business 12 years.
Wow, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
So you're thriving now. I mean,
thriving.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
It's awesome. And, now in Charleston, so the coffee scene was pretty slow in South Carolina to start. But now we have coffee shops on every corner, which is great.
Yeah. And you think if more opened up, it would hurt your business, but it really, like, once you have that scene, it helps everybody.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
And a lot of the other coffee shops that opened up are awesome. But do you know that new like 2013 to 2018 formula where it's like that 30s hip aesthetic, kind of like white with all of the cool lamps, but it's just not as cozy of an environment. And we are 500 square feet. We've got a bar. Everything's like dark wood. It's just cozy and not pretentious, and everyone's welcome, whether you know what a cortado is or not. Like, even if you ask me for a caramel macchiato, I'm not going to make you feel dumb.
Thank you so much. Like I love that actually. Like when you go into a shop and you just like meet people where they are and try to make them happy, try to make them walk out with a smile on their face, no matter what they want. And that includes somebody who does want to just come in and have that perfect shot or a cortado, or if they want like a 20 ounce, whatever, like that's what they want. Good. Give it to them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's about, creating relationships, and not everybody is the same. And I just try not to be, I don't want anyone to judge me. And I've been working really hard on the reverse. Like someone being like, I want a 32 ounce caramel macchiato with whipped cream. I'm like, all right, yeah, I'll get it for you.
You go.
I don't have that big of cup, but I can put it into 2 cups.
Yeah. And so was this your first coffee gig, or did you work at other shops before this one?
First. Yeah,
coffee shop gig.
Yeah, it's my first. So I have always loved coffee shops. Driatti was a very important part of my life. And I moved to Charleston. I was completely heartbroken. I don't know if that's inappropriate to talk about, like the Anyway, so,
No.
okay. So it's completely heartbroken. I moved there on a whim. My girlfriend of 4 years, we had packed everything up and we were supposed to move to Florida together. And 2 weeks before we were going to move, our house, we were living with David at the time. We were like, David was in one room and then we were in the other. She just decided that she just couldn't be with me. She didn't want to move with me and she didn't want anything to do. So I called one of my friends who lived in Charleston, was in a horrible situation. I said, listen, girl, I'm already packed up. I'm going to be down there in 2 weeks. Find us a 2-bedroom. I can't wait. Like my requirements are a porch downtown and I don't care about anything else. So I came and it was winter. It was really lonely and I was looking for a coffee shop and I stumbled upon City Lights. And Austin, this is going to crack you up. So I walk into City Lights and I'm like, oh my God, Sean McCrossan, who owned CD Alley in Chapel Hill, was behind the bar at City Lights Coffee in Charleston. And I was like, what are you doing here? And he was like, Candace, I moved to Charleston and my wife got a job at the College of Charleston. And I opened this coffee shop and it was probably that was 9 years ago. It was one of the most important things in processes of healing that's ever happened. So I immediately sat down and just, I don't know, caught up, hung out. I met people. It was incredible.
Wow.
And,
so you've been there for 9 years at the same shop.
I've been there for 9 years. Yeah. So
wow. So you're like the old hat there now.
Absolutely. So, and I've stepped down I still manage the shop, but I've stepped down my capacity because as my art business grows, I'll never give up the coffee shop. It's very important to me. But as my art business grows, I step down the amount of time I devote. So
and I really want to get into like what you're doing in your art life first, but I have a couple more questions about the coffee work first. So what would you say like in managing the coffee shop, and especially like while you're trying to do other things in your life, what have been some of the biggest challenges for you?
I mean, so the biggest challenges, of course, are finding the right people. And it's not that hard because typically people gravitate, but just my biggest thing when I hire someone, I was like, I'll teach you coffee. You have to holding a space in the community, creating a dynamic third space is the most important thing to me. I want people to come here and I want you to know their drink. And I want you to be able to like just have a conversation and cultivate an important relationship, even if it's a tourist and you only have 3 minutes. Like the types of people that I hire can do that. And so sometimes I get it wrong and I think they can. And it doesn't work out, which is not often, but most of the time, even like it empowers people. They're like, I can create, a difference or in my life or this other person's life in 3 minutes. That's insane. And it's a challenge and one of my favorite things to try to figure out.
And then on the flip side of that is when you have someone great and it's time for them to move on and try something new in your life, but it's so hard to let go sometimes.
Absolutely.
but sometimes that that's the right thing to do. And you've got to be the big person, put emotions aside and say, wish them the best in what they do next. But then as a manager, you're back to the drawing board and you've got to find another person who can fill that person's shoes, which is often so hard.
And I try not to, what were you guys
I'm hearing Boys to Men. It's so hard to say goodbye. Is that what's going on? Yesterday.
Well, it's funny because it's like everything like rolls so easy until somebody has to move on. And then suddenly I'm like, I have markets, I have this, that, but I have to, because I manage the shop, figure it out. And then I end up working insane hours and I do become a little bit grumpy, but then it gets worked out. It's great.
Yeah, you just got to take a deep breath and say, it worked out last time. It's going to work out this time. Don't freak out.
Don't
lash out.
This is a great job and people want it.
Yeah. Now, along with that, like, I know that like Charleston and San Francisco are both kind of similar in that they're not exactly cheap places to live.
Mm-hmm.
And And for the people who are, especially like when you bring on someone new at a coffee shop and they're probably like young, maybe like one of their first jobs, and they're trying to make ends meet, trying to figure out how to pay their rent. Do you feel like that's a challenge for people, like trying to get their health care in a row? That kind of stuff?
For sure. The healthcare is the biggest component, but the wage that we pay is it's a total living wage. It's more than most office jobs. But the caveat to that is the healthcare component. So trying to help figure out how to have so we have, some sorts of assistance, but it's mostly up to the individual person to get their healthcare and to set aside that money to pay for their healthcare. And for us, because there's no parking, we live in an urban area, you really need to live downtown in order to work at our coffee shop. And so the peninsula itself is pretty small. It's expensive. And so I end up having, there are a lot of people who are a couple of people in their late 20s and 30s who have, just like me, figured out a way to forever live affordably in an urban, desirable area. But then the rest are definitely college students or somebody who's young in their 20s. And so...
And those people can now be on their parents' insurance until they're 26. Something like 26. But then the people who aren't 26, I know here you can get help through the Affordable Health Care Act. You can get, and because of an independent coffee shop is below that threshold where they have to insure and can't afford really to insure their employees. It's not a big corporation like Starbucks or something like that. So do they, are they able to rely on the Affordable Health Care Act to?
But they still need to budget. And here's like the adult in me. I'm like, I've figured it out, not figured it out. No one's figured it out, but it's just like, all you have to do is every time, like divide it up by, to each paycheck or every week with your tips, whatever it is, and just set that money aside and apply it and live on the rest. So I feel like I've sometimes actually helped people budget too, which is not necessarily like the most like fun and cool romantic thing, but it's a life skill that you need.
Yeah. And I think as a manager, you do end up talking to baristas about money situations like that, or trying to give advice. Cause that like, if they're working there, they don't have their insurance coverage. That's not a good thing. Like everybody needs to have coverage. And it's definitely one of those like puzzles in life right now. Cause it's not all laid out for us.
It's definitely one of those puzzles in life, but I do have to say, so you probably don't know a lot about South Carolina, but one thing that's off topic, I have to say, is I'm really proud of Charleston because we did just elect our first Democratic Congress representative in 40 years.
Awesome.
Anyway.
Things are changing.
That's
Things
pretty
are
amazing.
changing.
Yeah.
And
it might be a blue ripple, but it's still a ripple. We'll take it.
Yeah, totally. But absolutely. And I think that for the baristas, they enjoy the work so much that they're willing to try to figure out their healthcare on their own rather than go to a lot of times. I mean, sometimes people find so much joy in other jobs that provide healthcare, but typically if you're working as a barista, you love it. And so you just make it work, you figure it out. And I would love to be able to pay, to have enough money in our coffee shop. The owner is one of my best friends, and we just look at the numbers and there's no way we could provide complete health insurance. It would be impossible, but yeah.
And so I could tell, like, you're talking about the election and talking about Charleston and how much pride you take in it there. How long have you lived in Charleston now? Has it been 9 years, you said?
It's been 10 years, actually. So I've lived here 10 years, and I've been at the coffee shop 9 years. I love it. I've carved out a really cool life. Like, I ride my bike around. We have our house. We built our studio in the backyard, and we make lots of art. We put it up everywhere. We sell it. And I get to go to this fabulous coffee house and have my community just surround me. It's awesome.
And what goes on in Charleston? What do you love about Charleston in and of itself?
Okay, so I checked the waves today, and it's 70 degrees right now, first of all.
God.
And the water is 75 5, and that's cold, right? Like it's getting cold. So I check the waves, and if there's good waves, I take my surfboard out and I go surfing. I come back, and I love where I live, and it's going to change, but the Black community here is so awesome. It's so large. And my neighbors, for example, on my little street, we have I live in a little cut through street. Some of my neighbors are single, widowed women who are between 69 and 87. And so the porch culture here is so awesome. So like, we're all just like every day, no matter what, like, it doesn't mean we have to do a super long hangout, but like we'll holler at each other from across the porch, across the road, and go over. And I don't know. I find it to be very special. And it's a privilege every day that I get to have these 7 women who are in my neighborhood in my life. I like the food scene. The food scene is the best, besides New York on the East Coast, which I know sounds ridiculous, but it's a lot of chefs have really targeted Charleston because we're such a tourist zone and come here. With that said, there's lots of mom and pop shops. There's good wine. The bicycling around town's awesome. I like my lifestyle. Yeah.
It sounds amazing.
It's cool.
So now is the time in the podcast where we get to talk about what you do in your life outside of coffee. And I know you're really excited to talk about that, and we're really excited to hear about it. So what is your number one biggest passion project that you have outside of the coffee industry?
So my husband and I are part of a artistic team. We call ourselves Dos Bandidos, and I'll tell you why. Like it does. So I get accused all the time of being like, why are you appropriating, Spanish or Mexican culture specifically? And the reason is it's unintentional. So when we first got together 8 years ago, we both figured out that we loved screen printing. I used to help John and Charlie back in the days when they had Frequency Records. And I've always loved it as an art form. Anybody can do it. You can make affordable art for the people because you can take your drawing, you can break it down and hand screen print it and still number it and sign it. And instead of selling something for $2,000, like an awesome piece, you sell it for $25 to $45, and people get to have, and it's on archival paper. But anyway, so we figured out that we were both screen printers, and we went on this trip. Traveling is very important to me, and it's really important to my husband. Now, it wasn't always, but we went on our first trip to Mexico together. That was 4 months into the relationship. And I said, all right, so I don't stay in I stay in small towns. I take second-class buses. I go to places that they don't even speak Spanish. Sometimes they speak Mayan, and you are coming along. So we had this just epic trip, just this inspirational, incredible, uncomfortable, just epic trip. And the idea to make art together was formed, and we decided that nobody wanted to put their name first, or like we didn't want to fight about it. So we formed a team name, and it was on this trip. It started out as a joke, and it just kind of stuck. And we've tried to change it to Two Bandits, but it just hasn't worked. So we're rolling with it forever. And so we make silkscreen art based on our travel, our life, politics. Sometimes it's all over the map.
Okay, so to interrupt, everybody's heard silkscreen. Mm-hmm. I bet you there's a lot of listeners who don't, even though they've heard it and they know it involves
for sure.
But what is silkscreen?
So I like to give 2 shout outs at first. So silkscreen art, the 2 most famous people I know who have done it are Andy Warhol and Shepard Fairey. Silkscreen art is you basically take your drawing and you break it down by layer. So we do that. We take our drawing, we scan it into Illustrator. And so each layer, so like black would be a layer. Say you have red, that's a layer. Say you have yellow, that's a layer. You take each individual layer, and sometimes it looks like weird shapes. Like it might be somebody's like clothing, like the red in the scarf. And so you just draw out the 2 stripes. And then you burn it through a photo emulsion process onto a screen. And you take that screen and you hand mix ink and you squeegee however many you're doing, whether it's 10 or 500, you squeegee the red through and you hang it to dry. And then you build it back up. Does that make sense? So you take it, you break it down, you build it back up, and you hand mix everything. And so it's a way to hand print something and still have it be affordable and to make mass numbers.
And you mostly do it on t-shirts, but you do it on other
we actually, so that's a great, I love that you brought that up. We mostly do it on paper, but the majority of what you'll be familiar with is everybody screen prints on t-shirts. It's the same similar process to do.
Wow.
So whether you make a t-shirt or a paper print. So
the print behind you on the wall, is that one of your pieces of art?
So one is a Spoleto poster. So that's not ours, but this was one that we did when we came back from Mexico because Our Lady, but some of it is screen print onto wood and some of it is spray paint and some of it is acrylic drawn in. So that's mixed media, which we do that too, mixed media or screen print.
So for those of you listening to the podcast, you want to get on YouTube and have a look at this. You should get on YouTube anyway for a half a second and just experience the joy that just radiates from Candace. I'm sure you can hear it in her voice, but you should also visit YouTube and see her live.
Oh, thanks, y'all. I feel so flattered to be able to talk about coffee and art with the two of you. It's so fun.
I'm wondering, once you screen print t-shirts, that makes your art mobile, extremely mobile.
Absolutely.
Do you ever see people wearing your art? And have you ever just seen a random person you don't know wearing your art?
Okay, so 2 stories I have. One, yes. One, my cousin was in Turkey. I don't know if she was in Antalya or Istanbul. I'll have to ask her again which part of Turkey at the time. And she sends me a text and she said, Candace, we were looking at the Acropolis, or I'm just making whatever she was looking up at. And we just saw 2 people wearing your t-shirts and we ran up to them and we were like, no way, our cousin makes those. And they had bought it from us at a market in Charleston and were wearing them in Turkey, across the world. And my cousin happened to see it. That was the coolest thing. It was so rad. And then the second coolest thing is my niece at the time she was in middle school and her friend came to visit Charleston and my niece just didn't tell her that I do markets and whatnot. She came to a farmer's market I was selling at and bought or they weren't friends at the time. They were about to become friends. But anyway, so she bought a tank top during the summer and then she went to school and one of the ways they became friends was because my niece was like, my aunt makes those. And then they bonded because she thought our cat artwork was so cool and she loved wearing it. So those were my 2 favorite stories. Yeah.
So do you sell your art at a farmer's market on a regular basis?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we do, I do art markets twice a month when they come up. And then we do it used to be a Folly Beach farmer's market every Monday. And we've stopped doing that because we've started doing the downtown market on Fridays and Saturdays. It's the night market. It's awesome. It's from 6:30 to 10:30 in the market sheds.
Okay. Good.
But yeah, it's fun. I haven't done Google. It's like we're having a hangout.
It is.
I know, it's fantastic.
It's so awesome.
So you got your inspiration or your initial inspiration from traveling across to Mexico. And I was curious, where do you continue to draw inspiration, going forward with your art?
Yeah. So politics, sometimes, whether it's good inspiration or bad inspiration. 2 years ago, Trump actually gave us a lot of inspiration in a negative way, but it was an outlet to express some frustrations. But mostly the positive stuff comes from traveling the world, traveling the States, our life in Charleston, the dilapidated buildings in Charleston, because obviously we both live in really historic places for different reasons. And I think that San Francisco, there's some parts that are still dilapidated, right? There's
yeah.
Okay, yeah, of course. So I don't know if you've seen different neighborhoods go from like these rundown houses. People are starting to fix them up. So there's still plenty left, but I find inspiration from just the rundown historic house that's been here forever. But our last trip was really fun. We flew into Las Vegas and we did a road trip, like a 60s car culture. We went through the desert and then went up Highway 1 from Los Angeles to San Francisco and hung out with Austin.
Yep. Which is the seed of this conversation we're having right now.
Yeah, it was cool because Austin and I hadn't seen each other in 10 years, maybe 12, right? And I actually looked him up on social media because I didn't have your number anymore. And I looked you up and I sent you a message and I saw where you worked and I went and stalked Spike's the day before you got in contact with me and you weren't working. I was like, oh, well, okay. Because I knew Brian was out of town in Florida, but we did get to connect. It was awesome.
That was so much fun. And
oh my gosh.
I love that we reconnected and it's like a whole new thing when you know, in your 40s and your 30s, like it's such a different world than when you're together in your 20s and early 20s. I don't know. We're different people now and I love it.
We're different people. And I love being in my 30s. And one thing I do want to talk about though, is the importance of Cafe Driotti. I know it's been talked about on this podcast before, but as far as coffee shops, I mean, my coffee shop, City Lights Coffee, is incredible. It's very important. But for me personally, and it's very important for me personally, Cafe Driotti completely shaped my late teens and early 20s. It was a safe space. It was a space where I got to meet friends. It's so romantic. The best coffee. Gay nights were amazing. It was so fun. And I still, every time I go back to Chapel Hill, I still go to Driotti, even though it's not the same completely because I don't know everyone. It still is just.
But it's still amazing. You can tell
it's still
as soon
amazing.
As you walk, as soon as you pull up, you're
like.
I can't wait to talk to some of the new people who are working there now. Hopefully, we'll get some of those people on the show in the future. And because I mean that place it's definitely like there's a creative energy there that I think infuses everybody who goes through there, whether they're customers or people working there.
Absolutely. It's incredible. I mean, I've never seen a coffee shop in that kind of setting before. It's and you've been obviously, Jodie, right? Because you're from that's where y'all met. That's where y'all met. Yeah.
You know, the condos down the hill on the Bowling Creek Trail, Village Green condos.
Oh yeah.
Owned a condo there for I don't even know how long. I lived in it 10 years. I think I owned it 17 years.
Walk on that trail.
And there's a little trail that winds up through the hill in the woods that goes straight from Village Green to Driotti.
So great.
Yeah.
That. I thought everybody lived like that. That's how I'm like you. I was there. That's how I grew up in my 20s, was with this delicious coffee in a backyard wonderland. And then I moved out to Colorado. Coffee was not happening here in 2002. I mean, there were pockets, but you had to really work to find it. And it really was jolting. It was jarring to me that people didn't have delicious coffee like in walkable distance.
Right.
Like, how are they getting through life?
I know.
And how do they wake up and socialize and connect with people?
I'm gonna go off screen for 1 second and wipe my nose. Okay, I'm back.
That looks so much better.
Thank you.
I wasn't going to say anything, but
I didn't notice it.
I'm just kidding. I didn't see a thing.
We usually talk to people about what are their favorite 3 coffee shops they've ever been to. So obviously Driotti is one of yours.
Yeah, Driotti. Right? Okay, so this is easy actually, and 2 of them are in Chapel Hill, and so Driotti, Open Eye, not new Open Eye, old tiny Open Eye. Yeah. I'm sure new Open Eye is great. I just have no connection. I don't even go back there when I go because Driotti's number 1, and City Lights Coffee. So Cafe Trio was pretty important, but I would say because I lived in Carrboro, I would drive to Driotti to hang out with my friends, and I would walk to Open Eye to like get a cup of coffee before going to work at Weaver Street.
Okay, I need you both to help me here because I lived in Chapel Hill, and Carrboro was a big commute for me. I know it's just a mile,
Right.
but that's how it was. I just lived in Chapel Hill. So I remember the old Open Eye, but I can't remember where it was located. Or I just remember it kind of in theory. Can you guys describe what old Open Eye was? Help me.
It's the same. It was in the same spot, but they expanded it, right? Like it was tiny.
Into the adjoining building, yeah.
Into the adjoining building.
Okay.
So it's like, do you know New Open Eye? Like big
Yes.
Open Eye now? Yeah.
Yes.
So it's like where Neil's Deli is right there. That didn't used to exist. It was, they expanded into the adjoining building. I don't even remember what was there. Like to me, it might as well have been nothing because I have no, like zero memory. But it was a third, maybe a quarter of the size. And it was just really intimate and small. And you walked in and you had the coffee bar, and there weren't many places to sit.
It just came back.
Yeah.
Like, I remember it. It was, and the bar was kind of facing south toward Pittsburgh. I remember it now. Okay. That's what I needed.
Whereas now it's just so large, which is cool because people want to work, but it doesn't have any kind of intimacy.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Do you guys remember, were the same owners Open Eye and Driotti the same
So
people?
what happened was when I started working at Driotti, it was under different ownership. And then the owners of Open Eye, they started their own roastery, Carrboro Coffee Company. And then eventually they bought Cafe Driotti. The owner of Driotti was amazingly creative and started this amazing place, and then was ready to move on, and they negotiated terms of sale, and luckily the people of Carrboro Coffee Company were happy to keep Driotti alive, and have done so for I guess 15 years now. A long time, maybe even longer. God. Yeah. So Candace, I'm curious, like outside of coffee, and I know you said you always want to keep like your toe in coffee, and that's kind of been a running theme. Actually, we talked to someone last week, Evan, who has a lot going on, has really expanded his career in the arts and in creative ventures, and still wants to keep that one shift in coffee because he just doesn't want to leave that world fully. But I'm wondering, do you hope eventually to have art be your full-time job?
So hope is an interesting word. I think eventually I'll have to give up the management and just do one shift because so my husband has a job at Boeing, which is like that's another like he really has he provides the insurance and we could figure it out, but he also likes having that structure. So what that means for me is doing all the back end stuff, which I also love. I love doing the back end stuff. I love going and restocking. I love working markets. So eventually it's going to become too overwhelming. And if I want a good quality of life, I will step down and give up my manager's role and go down to one shift a week so that I can really, to be perfectly fair for the coffee shop, it wouldn't be fair. And I would be so miserable without it though. It holds a very vibrant place. And so I need to be there at least once a week.
That really seems to be like a common running thread. Like when people's lives have moved on and they're finding other ventures, like a lot of people seem to, if you really have your heart in coffee and it's inspired so much inspiration in your life, like just not wanting to let go of that one last shift and like keep that.
I mean, I need people from all over the world. Where else am I going to do that? It's so incredible.
Yep. It's fun. It's so much fun. It's fun work. And it also can sustain you in times when you're, financially like you. And
I love pulling shots. I love steaming milk. I love making lattes. Like the actual acts of it are really cathartic for me. They're beautiful. And I love them.
This is kind of like what Brian was saying in his interview, how he takes so much joy in just putting glue on one crystal and applying it. And it's if you can develop a passion in just the doing of your art, I think that's part of what keeps you guys interested in being baristas is that it is art. and you enjoy the process of it.
Absolutely.
I question my sanity with that all the time because I've been doing coffee for like over 20 years now. And if I'm working a shift where like I end up being on the register like half the time, I find myself like chomping at the bit to make a drink.
Right.
Still, like how many, and if I had like a timer, like an odometer of how many lattes I've made in my life, like it would have, turned over like hundreds of thousands of times. And yet
I'm sure.
here I am still like on a Wednesday watching somebody make drinks and being like, I want to be over there making drinks. It's like, there's something about it. It's like,
it's beautiful. And just like the delivery system of coffee. And I love alcohol. I am not like, I think alcohol is incredible, but just again, being able to deliver a substance that's going to like alter someone's day in an awesome way is pretty fantastic too. Mm-hmm. People are pretty happy typically. I mean, maybe not before the coffee, but definitely after.
People come in and you're like, how are you today? And they're like, I'm tired. And I'm like, you know what? We get a lot of that around here. Like,
it's like, don't worry. Just give me
kind of goes with the territory.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
do you have any big travel plans for the future? Like right now?
Right now, so fall, I don't travel at all because it's busy season. So winter, we're going to Atlanta, and everyone's like, Atlanta. But I'm actually going to take a quick trip to Denver to visit my best friend, but it's going to be like a Wednesday through Saturday thing. But the Infinity Mirror Room is at the High Museum in Atlanta. So we're going to that, and we just decided, why not take 5 days in Atlanta? We've only ever spent 1 day and like do up, it's our southern city. We're going to Prague in the spring, and that's it so far on the list.
Why does Prague in spring sound so familiar? Those words.
I don't know. Is it a movie? Well, I
don't know. I feel like it's something.
The reason why we're going in the spring is because $500 round trip tickets popped up on my, and I was like, that's where I want to go is Prague next. And so I bought them. So, that's awesome. Which is usually how it happens because then I've like got a definitive trip and I know the tickets won't cost me a lot of money so I can budget the rest.
Well, Candace, I know that all of our listeners are going to love hearing this episode and hearing all about you, and they're going to go check out your website. They're going to, Jodie, do you have any other questions?
I want you to speak your website and your Instagram handle.
Great. So the website is dosebandidosart.com. And the Instagram handle is at dosbandidos. And you spell that DOSBANDIDOS.
Right. And
Two bandits.
We will put that in the show notes. So you will see.
Thank you.
Of course. And as we end our episode, we want to again thank you for joining us, Candace.
Thanks for having me.
Thank all our listeners for joining us again. We want to remind you, we want to hear from you too. So if you know a barista or anyone who we want to, coffee professional you want us to feature on this show, just let us know. Maybe you've got questions that you want us to delve into. We're happy to hear all of that from you too. Our email address is info@baristaunfiltered.com. And I encourage you to visit the website. We got it up and going a couple days ago. It's live and it has links to all the ways to find us. So if you're a person, I have a lot of friends like this who are saying, I want to hear your podcast, but like, I don't know how to use podcasts. Well, I mean, all of the links that allow you to listen through your desktop on YouTube or through Buzzsprout, which is, you don't need to know any of this. Just go to the website, baristaunfiltered.com
and click on stuff and eventually you'll succeed.
It's so easy and fun. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and we're also on Patreon. So if you want to support the podcast, you can donate in any amount. We're talking about $1. You can donate that way. I support a lot of podcasts just donating $1 per episode, and that gives people some incentive to keep producing the art that I love. So with that, I'll remind you to stay caffeinated, friends. And I'm Jodie Lee.
I'm Austin Miller.
I'm Candace Patterson. Wait, though, I'm just a guest, though.
She's just a guest. She's just a guest, but she's a very important guest. All right. Catch you later, guys.
Catch you later. Bye.